This is Twisted, where we pontificate and philosophize while attempting to unravel the intricacies of true crime. Many of our discussions relate to criminal acts and objectionable behavior. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to episode 27 of Twisted. I'm your host, John Taylor. You can listen to episodes through twistedpodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, or Libsyn. To get updates on new episodes and other true crime info, please follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Tiarta24, which is the acronym for the inmates are running the asylum, followed by the number 24. Today is the conclusion of my interview with Lynn Blanchard, who writes and advocates for the wrongfully convicted. Today we are continuing our discussion about her second book, Absence of Evidence, an examination of the Michelle Young murder case. Her book can be purchased through Amazon.com by entering the search terms Absence of Evidence. Now, back to the interview. Talk about the eyewitnesses in the neighborhood a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So this is a good one. Okay, so they started doing canvassing the neighborhood to find out what the neighbors know. There was actually 3 different witnesses in the neighborhood that came forward with information about things they saw that night. One of them was a newspaper delivery woman, and she saw a light-colored SUV near the house. She can't remember exactly if it was next to the driveway or in the driveway, but it was at around 3:30 a.m., I believe. And she remembers it because there were a lot of lights on outside and inside of that house, and it's normally a very dark road, and she knew that really stood out to her. So she saw something. The second one was this woman named Cindy Beaver, who was a postal worker who left work every morning at about 5:30. She had to be at work at 6, so she was very sure of her time. She saw a light-colored SUV at the foot of the driveway, ready to exit, with a man, what appeared to be a man, in the driver's seat, hands on steering wheel, with a woman with bushy hair, heavy-set woman with bushy hair in the passenger seat. And she was driving, she had her high beams on, and she caught them, and she turned the lights up right away, thinking, oh, I hope I didn't blind them. After this happened, she didn't know about the murder until a couple of days later. She told her boss at work what she saw, and she's like, should I call the police? I don't think it's important. They said they're only looking for anything between midnight between 2 and 5 a.m. She said, I didn't see it till after that time. And he said, I think you should call police. Call them and tell them what you saw. And so she did. Actually, I think he might have reported it for her. And then they went and talked to her, and, she shared everything. Over time, over several months, especially when the FBI got involved, they tried to discredit her and confuse her and say, well, maybe it was a different Friday. Are you sure it was that day? And they really frazzled her. But she was a very solid witness for the defense that she was very sure that she saw that on that day. So again, that totally points away from Jason Young.
When I first heard about the eyewitnesses, I thought that they were going to be incriminating Jason, because I thought what she was saying or going to say is that, it was a male and it could have been Jason. However, it was at 5:30 in the morning, so it's not possible it was Jason. And so what I initially thought, that might work, the prosecution might have something, turned into them doing everything they could to discredit these neighbors because it did not line up with their theory, not necessarily because the neighbors were wrong or mistaken.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that timing. That's really important to note that, since it was 5:30, he couldn't have possibly made it back to the hotel in time. So it was very damaging for their case. But again, it should have prompted them to look elsewhere, to look at other options outside of Jason. The third person that saw also an SUV, again described as light color. They were all kind of sketchy on the color. They just all described it as light color. This woman described it as kind of a gray. She said like a gunmetal gray. Her name was Faye Hensley, I think. She was on her way to a beauty parlor at around 7 a.m., 6:30 or 7. And she saw a light-colored SUV also parked at the foot of the driveway, but she doesn't remember seeing anybody in it. Again, that totally points away from Jason because the timing wouldn't have worked. And as far as Jason, with him being a suspect there, Cassidy had it, one of those, those little plastic things that you can put for childproofing on a doorknob, and you would have to use your fingers to squeeze it to open the door. She had that on her door, and Michelle and Jason would close the door to secure her in her room at night so she wouldn't, wander around out there as a toddler. He would have, if he was the murderer, he could have just secured her in her room and shut that door. But as we know, according to Meredith, she was found in the master bedroom in the bed where her mother, was found. So that doesn't work either. But that thing about the doorknob, I learned that from Jason's family, and it never came up at trial.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, you'd mentioned it a little bit before, but the condition of Cassidy, the 2-year-old daughter, and how that was seen as being incriminating towards Jason.
Yeah, well, she was found, actually, she was alert and calm and didn't seem, dehydrated, or because the EMS workers checked her over, checked her vital signs, and they said she was calm. She had no blood on her. She, didn't seem traumatized or dehydrated or anything. So it almost seemed like she didn't even see anything. It did not seem at all like she saw her mother being killed, or that she even saw her mother dead, because she just was not distraught in any way. But they thought that it had to have been Jason for her to be clean like that, because who else, some random killer is not going to take that time to clean up this child that they don't even know. So, of course, they suspected him. And I could see why they would. Okay, I mean, that makes sense. But what about Meredith? Now, nobody wants to point the finger at a victim's family, but as police, as investigators, you have to rule everybody out, right? But so if you want to talk about that, Meredith Fisher was kind of, I won't say she was a partier, but I don't know, actually that night she was, because she was at the bar. Supposedly her alibi is she was at the bar with her friend, Betsy, until it closed, so last call, 2:30. She said she then sat in the car for a while because she had quite a bit to drink, and she was worried about driving home. So then she's seen on a Sheets video at 3:15 in the store. I guess said she was buying a pretzel. And then she got home, and she said she got home. We don't really know, because how do we really know? She had some phone activity. I called her and made a credit card or paid a phone bill or something with her cell phone at 4:10 or something in the morning. So she was up and out all night, okay? She even told her friend that she was considering staying at her sister if she felt like she couldn't drive the whole way home, because she, obviously was worried about drinking. Now, what did police do to verify her alibi? I don't know that there's no evidence that they checked for receipts for the ale house where she was allegedly drinking that night. Or did they look for video camera to see? Or they did talk to a waitress that worked there, and she doesn't remember seeing them. Her friend, Betsy, she does verify that she was with her that night. But again, is that her friend just covering for her? How do you really know?
So her story was that she had been out drinking with her friend till about 2 a.m., I think, when the bar closed, and that she sat in her car for a few minutes to get her kind of bearing straight, to kind of sober up a little bit. Yeah. And then she said she went to, I think, Sheets before she went home, Sheets being the gas station. However, the police did check the surveillance at the gas station, but I wanted to say it was 3:30. It might have been 3:15, but it was an hour.
You're probably right.
It was an hour later than when she said that she would have left the ale house, and the gas station is 5 minutes away. And so there's a lot of missing time in her night, and it wasn't like her alibi was that she was asleep. Her alibi was that she's out in the area. I mean, it's not right next to where the Youngs live, but in the area, and that it can't be corroborated. And the information she did give just provides a greater window for her that's unknown as far as that evening goes. And then when she went to the house, she's the one that found Michelle. She's the one that called 911, and she was acting a little bit different than what people were expecting, though you can't always put a lot of weight on a response to a tragedy, but she didn't seem to be acting right.
Right, yeah, because, I mean, most people would check on their loved one because, is she breathing? Can I help her? That would be your automatic first instinct to do is, oh my gosh, she's in trouble, I got to try to help her. But she didn't. She went to the phone first, but she said she made the call from the house phone that was on the side table in the bedroom. But I found while researching the case that call was not on the home records. So I'm not really sure how she actually made that call. The call should have been there, unless for some reason the 911 call just didn't, for some reason, show up on the phone record. But that I talked to, it should have shown up.
During the 911 call, the operator had to keep insisting that she check on her sister because she wouldn't state with confidence that Michelle was dead. And so
Right.
she's saying that if she's not dead, you have to help her. We can't sit here in limbo wondering whether she's dead or not, and you're not willing to provide CPR or at least check to see if she was alive or dead.
Right. They kept trying to, insistently go and check. You got to roll her over. We got to try to do CPR. And Meredith was like, I'm holding her daughter. I'm trying to keep her daughter out of the room. When that should have been the last thing on her mind. I mean, the daughter would have already seen, if she was, found in the room, she would have already seen the crime scene. So, yes, we want to shield children, but first we want to help the person that needs help to survive.
It was very uncomfortable with the 911 call because the concern of the operator is significantly greater than Meredith's, and that Meredith was unwilling to go to her sister. And now she could have been scared. She could have known that she was dead and just couldn't accept it. But on the call, you felt like they're trying to convince this woman that she has to help her sister who may still be alive, and she's not wanting to do it.
Right. So, and the call went on for like 10 minutes. It was a long call.
Did Meredith, I think later, did she admit, I think on the call she said that Michelle was too heavy, she couldn't turn her over, but that later she said she never even tried? Yes,
later, it did come out at trial that in FBI questioning, she did admit that she really never even tried to turn her over. She said she was just too scared. Again, who's going to not try to aid their loved one? And then she said the body was cold, and so then they said, okay, fine, then just exit the house. There were paw prints, or she said there were bloody paw prints. She said she heard the dog whimpering when she went to the door, and that she did find paw prints throughout the house. Well, police never found any paw prints, and there was no evidence that the dog was in the house. It didn't urinate in the house or anything. So that was a big inconsistency and kind of a red flag. But
yeah, I feel with Meredith that it's not necessarily that there's anything overwhelming pointing towards her. However, just like with Jason, there were suspicious behaviors and actions going on, yet the police didn't follow up with Meredith and they did with Jason.
Yeah, that was the thing. So they were really fixated on his shoes and whether or not they left those prints, but they asked Meredith for her shoes that she was wearing when she found the body so that they could check. Actually, I don't know if they even tested them for blood. I think they did, but they didn't ask her for the shoes she was wearing that night. Those were the shoes they needed to try to rule her out, because those size 10 cheap shoes, she worked at a restaurant. Maybe she wore those shoes. We don't know. They did not try to. Now, I don't actually think because of how violent the murder was that she would have been strong enough to do it. So I don't even know, but she could have been there. She could have been an accessory, or she could have, we don't know. And I'm not even accusing her. I'm just saying they did not do anything to investigate her. They didn't check her computer. They didn't check her car. They didn't search her house. And usually the person that makes a 911 call is, considered a suspect too, until they can rule them out.
Right. Well, we know she was in the crime scene because she found the body. So
right.
It's somebody that needs to be looked at. And that's one of the things that's most troubling in this case is the lengths that they went to discredit Jason's alibi, yet they did very little to verify Meredith, who, like you said, that she has, as far as close to the baby, as far as wanting to take care of Cassidy,
Right.
she has the same motivation as Jason would, yet that's just discounted or discarded by the police in this case.
Right.
And they stayed completely fixated on Jason. And one other piece of evidence that the prosecution, I say evidence loosely, but was that they claimed that at his hotel there was a camera that was tampered with. Talk a little bit about how they presented that as evidence.
The clerk, the night clerk, testified that at around 5 a.m. or so, he noticed that the camera was dark from his office because you could see the cameras. Now, there's about 10 or 12 cameras throughout the hotel complex that cycle. So there's a screen of like 4 given cameras at a time, and then it would cycle. So maybe every 10 seconds or so you would see that image from any such camera. They said that at 5 a.m. one of the exits blacked out, and then it came back again. They went and plugged it in when the night clerk, the maintenance guy came in at like 6:30. They plugged it back in, and they said shortly after that it was tilted upward. Now, so that sounds, maybe he unplugged it so he could leave the building. But that doesn't work either, because at midnight he's down in the lobby getting a newspaper and a bottle of water and walks right up to the clerk, right up to the desk. Now, if he's trying to sneak out, why does he go to the lobby? He would have had more time. He could have just left out that door that they alleged that he unplugged. And I'm sorry, it wasn't unplugged at 5. That was when he noticed it, but they believe it was unplugged at 11:40. So maybe an hour after he would have checked in.
And they found a fingerprint on the camera, but it wasn't his?
Right. They found, and they did DNA testing too, but they couldn't tie Jason to it. And there was no image of him approaching the camera, which would have been a risky thing to do if that's going to be part of his alibi, to walk up to some camera he doesn't know could be capturing him and unplug it. No, there was only his card key to get into his hotel room was only swiped one time, and that was right after he checked in at around 11. So when he left the room, he did leave the room a couple times to go and get something from his car, and then he was in the lobby getting a newspaper or whatever. He was going to go smoke a cigar. He just propped his door open. Like, his door didn't shut real tight. Sometimes at older hotels, like, the door won't, like, necessarily pull or lock shut. So he just kind of left it slightly ajar rather than having to use his key again, because he didn't want to make a lot of noise with that door, disturbing other guests. And so he just left it like that. The clerk said that the exit door was propped open with a rock. But would anybody really make their alibi dependent on both the room door being open all night and the exit door? If anybody closes either of those doors, his alibi is toast, and he's nailed for the murder of his wife. So how weak is that he's going to do something so stupid,
And on top of that is that they could not tie any of those things to him. So it's considered circumstantial evidence, but it's coincidental evidence, which is they just are presenting, he was in this hotel and these things occurred, so we think it was him.
Right, because, circumstantial evidence is actually supposed to be fact-based that really does point to them. Like, it would be circumstantial evidence if he was caught, if they had him approaching that camera at that given time, but they didn't. And, how many hotels, people are always propping doors open, they're carrying their luggage in and out, whatever, or going out to smoke. I found a couple of things while researching this case. Number one, the receipts for the gas station where they said he stopped, they presented in court those receipts, that $15 gas purchase. They were from 2007. They didn't even have the right year. And then another thing, the cameras at the Hampton Inn, it shows at times when they said it could have been, they think it was Jason, the clerk was approaching that camera right at the time that it went back and appeared to come back on. So I think the clerk probably plugged it back in, so therefore probably unplugged it. Maybe he was sneaking out the smoke at night and didn't want to be seen, But that didn't come up at trial either. They never analyzed the footage and they never showed any pictures of him of the clerk or the, going toward the camera or anything like that.
It's really concerning to me that, because you want to believe that the police are trying to get the right person, that they don't want to convict or go after or arrest a person that's not guilty. So why are they ignoring these details? That's so perplexing to me.
I think it seems like somebody said, we're pinning this on him one way or another, because they didn't arrest him until 2009. So, 3 years after the murder, and they didn't have any new revelation at that time.
Right, with the exception, to fast forward, he did lose a civil wrongful death case with dealing with her death, and then he went to trial for the first time. I think it was in 2011, and that ended in mistrial with 8 voting to acquit and 4 voting to convict. But then they tried him a second time, and they convicted him of first-degree murder, and I think the jury was out for less than 8 hours. And I guess my question would be, what do you think changed between that first and second trial to go from having 8 people willing to acquit him to 12 that were willing to convict him and convict him quickly?
Right. Well, in the second trial, they introduced the civil suit testimony. Civil suits are very interesting because this is kind of unprecedented, where civil suits are not allowed to be, or rulings on civil suits aren't allowed to be entered in a criminal trial because obviously it's prejudicial. The evidence needed to, for a civil suit is much less. Right,
the threshold is more likely than not.
By the threshold, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
So in the civil suit, he didn't respond. He did not, again, per his lawyer's advice, he did not respond to the civil suits because he would have had to submit to a deposition, which, okay, fine, if that's just all there is to it. But the police and prosecutors participated in the civil suits, in that the police detective wrote an affidavit saying, it's my opinion that Jason Young murdered his wife. He didn't have any facts to back it up. He just said his opinion. And then the prosecutors turned all of their discovery over to the civil suit attorneys. So there was no way that any judge, he couldn't have possibly won the civil suits. It was probably best he just doesn't respond. They took his daughter away, and they also did a wrongful death suit. The jury heard that, and they also heard that the same judge that was over the civil suits was his trial judge.
That, to me, was more concerning that it was the same judge in the civil suit as the criminal suit than the fact that they disclosed the civil decision. Because to me, as a juror, you're looking at this judge. This is the all-knowing person about the law. He runs the courtroom. He tells the lawyers what to do. So you're telling me that he already decided that this guy's guilty, and now you want me to decide on it.
Yeah, he actually did. There's a Slayer statute, and he actually did a default. It's called a default judgment. He declared him the Slayer so that the family could win their money. $15 million award. When he could have said, I'm postponing this till after the trial, but he did go ahead and rule on default. So the jury knew that same judge thought he was guilty based on the civil. Right.
Yeah, that's just, to me, that's completely shocking. And if you want, we could probably get into an entire discussion just on the appeals that have taken place, but this has gone through the appeals process. The Court of Appeals overturned his conviction, but then the Supreme Court reaffirmed the conviction.
Yes.
Kind of where are they now, or where is he now with this case?
Well, right now they're still so basically he won his appeal because the Court of Appeals believed that it was improper that they did allow that civil testimony. So that was basically why he won the appeal. There were other appeal issues that were not argued yet. So he is still in the appeal process for those other issues that the Supreme Court did not reverse. That will be pending probably in early 2017. There will be a hearing on that. It's just a very slow process, and we'll have to see what happens. I can see him someday being freed by the innocence group if things don't happen in this appeal process.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith that eventually he's going to get another trial and be exonerated. Just because I feel like that legally that there were just so many issues with his case, but just on a logic level, I mean, the title of your book, Absence of Evidence, completely sums up this case.
Yeah.
I mean, I was dumbfounded by the jury's decision in this case, other than the fact that the judge had already ruled in the case. That's the only explanation I can come to as to why a jury would convict him with essentially no evidence.
Well, the jury said, "Where's his shoes?" And they also said there was a missing shirt. This was a shirt that he was wearing on camera at Hampton Inn camera, and police said they couldn't find it. But their evidence handling was a little bit weak. They didn't document everything. And
right. It's a lot of, there was so much where the fact that they didn't have evidence, they were presenting that as evidence.
Right.
Which is always a concern to me. And just to finish up, I wanted to say, as far as your book, I absolutely enjoyed it. I read it all in one day, and it's one of the things. I mean, I read a lot of true crime, and most true crime is storytelling, and your books are very analytical, and they make you think so much. I mean, you really think about the different aspects and the evidence and what went on, and I hope that and the way you write, I think, is just really important, that people aren't bogged down with these thoughts of, well, he was having an affair, so he killed her, without with just jumping to that conclusion, which I fear that juries do that a lot these days, and just really digging into the details of the evidence. And I think you did an excellent job of presenting the evidence in this case to get people to think about it.
I appreciate it. I spent a lot of time researching it, several months, and talked to the family a lot, talked to some of the witnesses, and talked to one of the investigators, and tried to present the case the best that I could.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for talking to me today. I just found it very fascinating.
Thanks.
What's so scary about this case is who couldn't be convicted under these types of prosecutorial tactics. The prosecutors in this case, they didn't present circumstantial evidence. They presented coincidental evidence. And you've probably heard homicide detectives talk about how there are no coincidences in homicides. But of course there are coincidences. And when you're zeroing in on the coincidences that agree with your theory and ignoring the coincidences that don't, the chances of finding those coincidences are so much higher. I think a perfect example would be a horoscope, where people, they zero in and they emphasize the things that line up with what they believe, and they discount the things that don't. To me, in this case, the prosecutors absolutely did this. The fact that they're ignoring the eyewitnesses, all the neighbors who were seeing people who couldn't have been Jason, and the fact that they did everything they could to discredit his alibi, yet his alibi still stands today. To me, those two factors show the tunnel vision and the unwillingness of the prosecutors and the detectives in this case to really give this an unbiased look and really just look at the evidence rather than trying to make the evidence fit Jason Young. I want to thank Lynn Blanchard for taking the time to talk with me today about her latest book, Absence of Evidence, which can be found on Amazon with the search terms Absence of Evidence. You can listen to the Twisted Podcast through iTunes, Stitcher, or Libsyn. For more information on upcoming shows and other true crime info, please visit Twisted